Okay, we are now recording. All right, it is Monday, the 25th of May, last Monday in the month of May, commonly referred to as Memorial Day, Armistice Day, and many of you um, probably took time to be with the family. I was going to push this class over to tomorrow, but then I would have had to do two lectures. So I decided I would go ahead and do this one at the end of the day. I took off from grading papers, but I'm going to grade a few things after this. So don't worry about getting caught up on things. So we are at week three. Week three. This is a very important week for this class. So let's go ahead and let me share my screen. Okay, so you see all this information here, and you know that your rubrics are important for your assignment number 3 because you didn't have one for week 1, and then your lecture number 3 here, and then we have 3 more lectures to go. And you also know, well, it doesn't matter saying it to the people that are here, but the people that aren't here know there'll be a delay in getting the lecture because of the delay in WebEx making it available. So, all right, let's look at the announcement for this week. In this week, Module 3, Policy and Social Trends, Mental Health, and Criminal Behavior is going to be covered. And that's an area that's right down your alley, I think, perfectly, I think. So you should do pretty well this week. Well, you should do well every week, but this week should be something that you can definitely relate to in terms of the work that I know that you desire. So, chapter 3 and 4 of Drugs, Crime, and Justice, I sent that to you already. You should have that now. Sent that Saturday. Then we're going to deal with policy, social trends, drug use, abuse, theories of addiction, and then drug identification activity. And your discussion post, which is due tomorrow night. Social policies and trends, your initial post tomorrow night, your reply post due Saturday. And then finally, you have 2 assignments, your course project, heroin and crime, which is the second part of the paper that you're doing. And you'll notice one thing about these papers, they're all independent of the other. Common topic is that how heroin is dealt with, and from all aspects. If you saw that from week 1, we talked about that. And then the quiz that you have, you know about that. It's a time quiz, and that you will need to have no materials in front of you when you take the quiz. It's multiple choice quiz, and then you also want to make sure that you have gone through the materials to help you. And so both of those are due this Monday coming up. And you know about my motto, adversity is the springboard to success. Let's look at the course calendar once again. Okay, this is where we are today. And again, you know, you can click on it and it opens up and it gives you more information there on each of these. So initial post the 26th, the 30th, your reply post, and then 31st, which is Sunday, your course project and quiz, and then your key phrase. And then next time we have a lecture, we will be in June, which is the final month of this course. So looking at from June 1st, we'll basically have 3 more weeks to go, or close to 3 more weeks to go, because your final day of class is the 19th, not the 21st, but the 19th. That's when all classes end. And so you want to make sure that you see that. You'll see that in all the classes that you take with me. So you take the introduction to criminal law as well. So that's the final date. I've had a few people sometimes to try to send stuff at 12 o'clock, which means it'll be on the 20th. I can't take it, even if it's 12 o'clock. It's got to be 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And so you know that. And then everybody already knows that the lectures are Central Standard Time. Everything based upon Central Standard Time, because some of you are in the East. And so like right now, it's 8:36 here, it's 9:36 there. So you want to always remember that it's based upon my time. And actually, those of you who are on the East, if you know something is due at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, that's almost 1 o'clock your time. It's not that you get an extra hour, it's just that your time is different. All right. So now let's take a look at the actual module itself. Policy, social trends. That was my doorbell that you heard back there. And remember, use your drugs and crime course guide that was put together under a lot of work when this course was put together. And this, you can click on module 3 and it comes to help you with this so you can do your papers well. But you can do well if you follow the instructions of the rubric and what I talk about during the lectures as well as the body. Then test anxiety. For those of you taking tests, you can look at the student success guide, and then there's a test taking tab for things that will help you with scoring higher on the test. Okay, and then your course project, and it tells you, you know, what you really need to do and all of this. This is really good. APA to help you as well. Okay, so there's no reason why you can't succeed because we give you the tools that will help you. Now, some students take the position, well, I got enough assignments, I don't have to go through that. No, this will help you do your assignments, make it easier. So let's take a look at the course project first of all, which is your written assignment for this week, other than your discussion post. Heroin and crime. And you're going to take the fact scenario that's given above, and then you're going to do the same thing as you do every week. A minimum of 3 pages. Remember, it's APA, which means it's double space, which means that citations in the body and references at the end. And it also means that you have Roman 12 that you use in terms of the font size, but it's a minimum of 3 pages and 3 credible sources, not counting your textbook. In fact, I encourage students to stay away from the textbook, and I discourage you using it because the idea is to sharpen your ability to be able to conduct research. And that's one of the goals that we want our students to be proficient at. So, and then, you know, in terms of credible sources, that Wikipedia is definitely not one. It's named in the rubric, and it's named in your modules. And you've heard me talk about if you were in other classes of mine as well. And so it tells you again to include proper citations. That means APA formatted. You have a cover page and a reference page. Now, keep in mind when you do the reference page that the citations in the body should match up with the reference page. In other words, for every citation that's in your paper, and there should be citations throughout the paper, by the way. Don't throw me 1 citation on each page. Don't throw me 2 citations. Citations provide support for the statements in your papers because your papers are going to contain statements, even if you paraphrase them from that you discover from your research. So I want to know where you got that information, even if you paraphrase it, where you got the idea. And so what I'm saying is that if you have um, one citation and 4 references, something's wrong with your paper. So they should all balance. Remember, citations provide support for the statements. References provide the full source of where you got the information that you utilize in your research, which is cited in your papers. That's how it should be remembered. So if you remember it that way, you won't forget it. And it's not or, it's and. Citations and references. Okay. And then it reminds you about using what I just showed you a few minutes ago, the drugs and crime course guide to help you. So let's take a quick look at the rubric, which at this point should be very few because it tells you, first of all, you see your due date. Click on view the rubric, and then you read it, and it tells you pretty much what I just told you a few minutes ago with the information, the fact pattern, and then it's a 3-page minimum. You can go longer, by the way. You don't get penalized for going longer. You will get penalized for going less. And then make sure that you include 3 credible sources, and be sure to rely on credible, reliable resources other than your textbook. Now, let me say this to you also. It doesn't tell you this, but I've said this before. Make sure you have your critical thinking in your papers, because of the fact that I'm going to run all of your papers through Grammarly to determine the content and the source. And the information if a Wikipedia can definitely next assignment, which is pretty explanatory. Your discussion post, you know what your initial post is the fact pattern that you're using dealing with the war on drugs, not one of my favorite areas that you'll hear me talk about tonight and other weeks. And then your first post will just the advantages and disadvantages of war on drugs. And then the second reply post, uh, respond to a student who had a second position or different one from yours. You know the due dates on that. And then your quiz time for 30 minutes. You only have one opportunity to complete this exam. and you want to make sure that you abide by the academic misconduct policies set forth in the syllabus, which means you shouldn't have materials that you use. And you also saw the video that we did during week 1. And then, of course, your key word or phrase, the live lecture. Okay, let's close that down. So let's go actually into the module itself and the lesson content. And let's talk about what we're going to deal with today. Um, Theories of drug addiction, abuse based on biology, genetics, psychology, and sociology, the connection between mental health and self-medication leading to substance abuse, and the relationship between substance abuse and criminal behavior. I'll say that a million times during this course. Summarize the policy and social trends with the connection between drugs, mental health, and the criminal justice system. Okay, so we're going to deal with each of these two sections right here. Okay, so now what's happening with drug abuse? And what has happened is that there have been so many laws passed, and they continue to pass laws dealing with the use of drugs, abuse, addiction, and other drug-related behavior. And the idea is to regulate the use of these substances and to prevent or reduce criminal activity associated with certain drug use and abuse. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb right now and say this from the beginning because it is absolutely positively true. There is a strong correlation between drugs and crime. In other words, most of the crime that takes place is centered around drugs, and a big portion of it centered around people who find themselves in situations where they are users of drugs and they commit property crimes. Those you who take my criminal justice and introduction to criminal law course know about that from last week. Crimes take place because individuals need to be able to get their fix. And so as a result of that, one of the problems that's happened is that individuals are incarcerated and they end up becoming recidivists because of the fact that they're arrested, arrested, charged, and then incarcerated and released. And those individuals become what we call recidivists because the problem has not been addressed. You're going to discover as we move through this course that law enforcement is even recognizing that the war on drugs is best dealt with in terms of looking at it from a health perspective. Just like this pandemic that we're dealing with is a major health issue, so too is the use of drugs. And some of the drugs that are the cheaper ones. And so you're going to discover that we deal with drugs from the perspective where individuals start out by using drugs for pain, like painkillers, and they will start to graduate from those because their body needs more, and they will end up finding themselves dealing with oxycodone, and then they will be dealing with heroin ultimately to deal with the issue. And you're going to discover during the course of your research and in this course that we're in a pandemic because it's worldwide for the coronavirus, COVID-19, but we're in an epidemic. And actually, I think it's pandemic too, because drugs themselves are related to international activity. dealing with various cartels from Mexico, from places like China, from other places outside of the United States. And so what has happened is that law enforcement is operating like trying to plug up a hole to keep a mouse out of your house. You plug up one and they cut up another hole so that they can continue to distribute it. And so there are laws that are passed relating to the war on drugs to crack down on this behavior and activity on both the federal as well as the state level. And mandatory sentences are imposed for individuals. And again, um, this, as it says here, as a result, sentencing disparities exist for possession of powder and crack cocaine. And so what that means is that there's a really bad um, situation that takes place with these two, especially with crack cocaine, where the jails are overcrowded and that the individuals are not getting the treatment. The only way to minimize or cut into the drug use, which would also cut into crime in general, is to get help for those individuals who are in possession of powder and crack cocaine. And so it says here mandatory sentencing for this thing because it's very dangerous, dramatically increase the population and put a strain on the uh, resources of correctional uh, facilities. So, so we have a problem here. And so now it says recent attitudes and policies have shifted away from the war on drugs because, as I said, it wasn't effective. Okay, it wasn't working. It wasn't getting the job done that it was intended. It was felt that the war on drugs would help individuals to deter them from using drugs and committing crimes, but it had no such effect. So, and it says the reality that incarcerating people for drug-related crimes may not be effective in reducing recidivism, as I said. And so now what we deal with is the use, abuse, and criminal behavior. And it's believed that there are various reasons or theories related to individuals who engage in drug-related activities. And so that brings us to the study of three models, which kind of um, um, an attempt to try to analyze why persons use or abuse drugs. I already told you a few minutes ago. So the study suggests three models that we're going to just spend a little bit of time on: the choice model, the disease model, and the self-medication model. And so we're going to start out with the choice model, which the name dictates what it is. Belief that the person chooses to use a substance and can simply choose to stop using it. I don't think anybody really believes that that's true, that they choose to use the substance, but then in a reality, they can't simply stop using it. Let me use the parallel. People who smoke. Now, you know, and I know that individuals who smoke cigarettes have a tremendous battle with kicking the habit of cigarette smoking. Well, if you can imagine how bad that is, take it and apply it to drugs, which actually take control of the individual's will, takes the individual's free will and puts them in bondage, and so that they are a puppet to whatever that substance that they have started getting into. Now, again, there are various ways and reasons that people find themselves uh, dealing with this from the standpoint of having originally, as I said, started to go to a doctor. I definitely am a person who's afraid of painkillers. I monitor them very carefully because I see what happens with painkillers. I see painkillers do two things to people. First of all, it puts them in a position where they have to have more to alleviate the pain, and they keep going higher and higher and higher. That's the same thing that I learned when I was in the police academy about crack cocaine and why people overdose on it. As I shared before, that I have a baby sister that passed away with that, is that they start out with a certain quantity, get a high, and they want to get back to that high. But in order to get back to that high and go beyond, they have to increase the dosage. And the more they increase the dosage, the more they put themselves in jeopardy of losing their lives. And so that particular individual is stuck in that level. And then, so that's the choice. I don't believe in the choice model. I don't think it's worth a hill of beans, and it certainly is the way reality works. If the individuals could choose to stop it, they would. Now, somebody might say, oh, I know some people who have. That is not the norm, people. The norm is going through the various stages, like the withdrawal aspects of it, which are absolutely something that we will deal with later, and deal with heroin and stuff like that, where we deal with methadone, replacing one drug for another. And the point of the matter is that the individual's life changes, their style of living, even their friends, and sometimes their distance from their families as well. So then let's talk about the self-medication model. And it says that people use legal and illegal substances to compensate for underlying problems that have not been properly treated, such as you might have people dealing with anxiety, depression, or mental illness diagnosis. So what happens is that people use drugs as an escape mechanism from reality, and they find themselves in a depression. And in order to lift themselves up, they'll take a drug to lift themselves up momentarily. But what they're doing is they're also building a um, addiction to that drug as well. We're dealing with the mental illness aspects of it. We start talking about the person who has no drug use, but then you add that to the mental illness that that person have. It's like an illness on top of an illness, and that person is very dangerous to themselves and to others around. And that there is another step that has to be dealt with in terms of the drug use with a person who is mental ill. You have to deal with the causes and guide that person into a new direction in life, taking them into what I call a 180. And the reason why I say 180 is because if you look at the 12 o'clock on your clock, and to the right, 15 minutes of it is 3 o'clock. And if you're at 3 o'clock, then you could see where you need to go down to 6 o'clock, and you can see where you came from. So you still can possibly find yourself in that situation easier. But then you gradually move down to past 4, where you're getting better. 5, you get better. And 6. 6 puts you at the bottom of the clock, and you're heading in a new direction. And in a circle, we know that a circle, circumference of a circle, is 360 degrees. And so that 180 puts you in a new direction so that you can then go in that direction, but don't start to go past that, because then you start to head back towards what we call relapse. And the point of the matter is that we want to get you to the point of 180 to get you pointing to a new life. Now that probably will involve new friends, um, new places that you go to. It might even involve changes in your music style and things like that. It might involve you reaching out for a relationship with um, God, as I would recommend, or someone who you believe is greater than you. You'll also want to establish someone who's strong, who could be one that you could be held accountable to help you in those situations. So, so the self-medication model is the use of the drugs make the situation worse. And as I said, they take the drugs to um, run away. It's an escape mechanism. That's basically what the self-medication aspects of it is. Okay, and that's what people do sometimes with painkillers and other types of drugs. They don't intend on getting addicted, but they're trying to escape life in general. My baby sister, she was a baby when my mom was killed, and so as a result, she still had problems because she never had a relationship with my mom. In fact, she had a security blanket that she had as a baby. When she died, she still had possession of that, uh, and never let it go, because she didn't have a relationship with my mom. She had my aunt, but how many know it's just not the same? And so she had other issues too, dealing with alcohol as well. And the reason for that is trying to escape. And so ultimately, that's what the self-medication model is all about. So now let's get to the model that I like to work with. It's called the disease model, on the idea that addiction is the result of a chemical or biological issue. And that the theory that punishing people for drug related crimes without addressing the reasons for the drug use, hello, somebody, or addiction will not likely change the pattern of criminal behavior. So you have to get to the root of the problem. Okay. And as a result, it says here that many public health advocates and medical professionals advocate that treatment should be part of any sentence for drug related convictions. You're going to later discover law enforcement is getting on board with this. And we'll talk about that in weeks 5 and 6, but especially during week 5 and week 4, which is the next week. Treatment and rehabilitation will be studied in greater detail when we get to module 6. All right. Now, let me say this to you while I'm talking about this. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. And I'll use this example over and over. There was a young man, and I had many of these, but this young man I knew personally. I knew his family extremely well, who lived in a suburb of Chicago. And this young man was arrested many times for burglaries, and he was incarcerated. And then he would get out, and then he would commit a burglary again and keep going. So finally, I got to represent him while he was on probation for burglary, and he did what we call caught a case, or he committed another offense, and it was generally burglary. And so, as a result of that, this individual was in custody. And I generally recommend to families to get individuals out so that they can be out of out of jail while awaiting trial, because that's a cesspool of drug activity in itself. But in this case, I recommended to the family that they keep him in custody. And the reason why I wanted him to be kept in custody is because I knew that they weren't going to have the capacity to be able to keep an eye out on him, um, and that he was going to commit another burglary. Now, I will say this about burglars. Burglars don't want to come into contact with people. That's why they're burglars. Their idea is to steal stuff, sell that stuff to support their habit. And so this young man had such a problem with that I knew it wouldn't be so good. So the family went against what I said, and they decided they would get him out. And a few days later, the young man uh, escaped from the house and went to another part of town, crossed a highway or expressway to get to the other part of town to commit this burglary. And while he was in the midst of committing the burglary, the police were called and a chase ensued on foot where he tried to get away from them. Well, he ended up over the fence to get back home to and attempted to cross the highway, and he never made it. He was hit by several vehicles and trucks, and he died. And the cause of death was, um, of course, being run over by multiple vehicles. But the real cause of death was his addiction to the drugs that he needed to have in order for him to operate. In other words, the issue of the treatment was not um, being dealt with from those times before that he was in. And so those are the kinds of situations that's just an example, but those are the kinds of things that I talk about. So you understand then the policies and the position when it comes to substance abuse. You can learn more by checking on this article on your own time. And then this you can do on your own. Theories of addiction. Take a few minutes and theory that drug users can stop or use or control, but choose not to. Put your answer and then click next, and then it will tell you materials, not just these three that we read about, but more in detail from the materials that you read and that you see in your PowerPoint. Okay, and that is it. Oh, one thing I do want to remind you, after week 3 completes, which will be Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, I will not accept assignments from weeks 1, 2, or 3. It's already that if you're already over the 7 days for week 1, um, uh, week 2, you are not over 7 days because the assignments were just due yesterday for week 2 for you guys. And so the point of the matter is that by the time you get to the end of week 3 with the assignment and heading toward week 4, 1 to 3 will not be accepted after that. So that's something for you to know, unless arrangements have been previously made. And those of you know who you are, and I know who you are. So don't worry about that general statement. Okay. So anyway, that's all that I really have for today. And any questions? No questions. Okay. Brother Presley, you were kind of quiet the other day. This was a this was a lecture that was right down your alley in terms of what you want to do, isn't it? I know. I know. One of the things I do, I take time to learn my students if they share. Good, good. I'm glad you enjoyed the lesson. So I'm going to give you a key phrase. Any suggestions? Because I already know what I'm going to say. No suggestions? Oh, wow. You get it. Substance abuse. You got it. You don't have to put method on it. Substance abuse. That's it. Very good. That's what the topic was all about. If you pay close attention and get the gist of it, most of the time, sometimes I'll throw you a curve, but that's it. So with that, I'm going to say good night. Enjoy the rest of your holiday. Don't have very many hours left. You especially, you got about less than 2 hours left in yours. And so enjoy the rest of your evening. Go back and eat some more of that good food uh, that you guys got you have. You know how it works. You have the main meal, and then yeah, some leftovers. So yeah, and sometimes leftovers are better than the original meal itself. Uh, so I'm sure. Looks like both you guys are good cooks. So that's for sure. You're like me. If you look at me, you'll know why I'm saying that. I eat well, and I enjoy. Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, and I tell people the being kept at home definitely don't make it easier. All right, all right. You have a good one. I'll see you next week. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me, and enjoy your week and stay safe as well. Thanks. Good night.